By the end of this year, I will have turned 30. And I think as the decade of my life closes, it's a good idea to take a look back, see how far I've come, and maybe just to take this opportunity to talk about aging, growing up, growing older, and how you should kind of look at your life, or at least how I do. And hopefully some of it'll be kind of important, or if some of it'll be helpful to you. I mean, whenever I do a video like this, part of this is just to get this stuff off my chest, and because I find it helpful to talk about it. I like to think, though, that I'm expressing thoughts that a lot of other people have, and maybe I'm providing some measure of comfort in the ways that I try to deal with these things. So, I generally speaking have two main philosophies of life when it comes to aging, other than just the general dread of getting older, because I think we all dread getting older. I think we dread it even more than dying, per se, because there's that expression, the part of the American dream is to live long and die young. And the first story that we know of, Gilgamesh, is all about the fear of aging and the desire for humanity to indefinitely prolong their life. When, of course, we all will grow old and die at some point in time. So when I look back on my life, I think like most people, you sometimes think of your regrets. And I suppose I do have some regrets in my life, but to a certain extent more than I think a lot of depressed people, I probably have fewer. Because I think ultimately your past is what makes you. And I know that's a very generic thing, but I think the majority of identity, I mean, you have your soul, you have kind of that core spark, but I think who you are as a person is very much determined on the experiences you've had, the decisions you've made, and just kind of what life has thrown at you and what you've thrown back at life. So I don't know if it's really a coherent thing to be concerned that something might have been different in the past, because if something had been different in the past, then you wouldn't exist in the way that you are now. It's almost kind of, I guess, an I think, therefore I am thing. The past decisions created the you who is regretting your past decisions, and you wouldn't be the same person if something different had happened. That's not to say, like, the past doesn't bring pain or something, but I guess that's just kind of my way of trying to deal with past regrets. The other thing is, and this is going to sound really bizarre, when I was younger, when red versus blue was first a thing, I remember watching it, and they had an episode, like a PSA episode about tattoos. And it's like, this is why you shouldn't get a tattoo. And they're like, think about it. Were you smart 5 years ago? They're like, no, you were really stupid 5 years ago. So you shouldn't get a tattoo now because you'll be smarter in 5 years. And I thought that was a really good way of looking at it, is don't look at where you are compared to everybody else around you. And I've talked about this many times in the past. Comparing yourself to other people is inevitable, and it's extremely difficult not to do it. And I do it all the time. But when you're comparing yourself to other people, all you're seeing is the them that they show the outside world. Their perception of themselves and their knowledge of like what's completely going on in their lives is very different from how they might appear on the outside. And likewise, you appear to them completely different. So they might appear to be like really successful business-wise. Now, number one, they might be lying or really jazzing up what it is they do for a living or how much money they make. And they might even be in debt to kind of keep up the appearance. But their life might also be like a disaster. Like they might not talk to their parents. Maybe they have like some ex-wife they're paying stuff to. Maybe there's all kinds of stuff that could be going on. Likewise, someone might be having a lot of luck with women. Maybe he's really happily married, but there's financial stuff. The truth of the matter is you don't really know. And the concept of kind of the average person is once again kind of a projection of what we think the average person should be. And I guess going beyond that, is there one universal standard that we can kind of apply to everyone of success or failure? Now, obviously, there are some basic standards, being able to clean yourself, feed yourself, those sorts of things. Ideally, being able to be a responsible and productive member of society and support yourself so you're not a financial burden on others. I guess would be kind of some basic measures of success. But I think you have to keep in mind success is a very relative thing because people aren't equal, people aren't the same. People are born with very different talents, very different gifts. Some people are much more gifted than others, some people are much less gifted than others. Some people are born with a lot of advantages in terms of their environment, be it to a rich family or a supportive family or to an abusive family or to a poor family. There's like a lot of things that go into it. And also, just blind luck plays a very big role in it. Maybe you met somebody, maybe you made a specific decision, maybe some spurious factor happened, like you saw some flyer for a career center. You know, when we get back to like the path of the garden of forking paths or stuff like that. And there's a lot of stuff. And it's kind of, I think, hard to really directly compare any particular people and to try to say this person's a loser, this person's a winner. I mean, there is, but just for the sake of this, we're just stick with me. So when I look at my life, I say to myself, not how am I doing relative to the average person my age, but how am I doing relative to myself, relative to where I came from. And I think, generally speaking, if you can look at your life and you can say, in some tangible way, be it mentally, spiritually, physically, financially, in terms of your relationships or friendships, if in some way you're better off on this birthday than you are on the last birthday, then your life is a success. And that you should feel good about that and you should feel thankful about that. Really dealing with depression or dealing with anything is about just continuing to plod along. You're not going to solve all of your life's problems overnight. The best you can do is just start making whatever changes or whatever progress you can and just keep plowing through it. And eventually things will get better. Eventually things will go your way. And you shouldn't get upset that, like, oh, I know this one guy who's 30 and he has like $10 million and a supermodel GF and all this other stuff. Because once again, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. He might be in debt to, I don't know, like Chinese scam billionaires or something. Like he might be a drug addict. Like you don't know. And that person's not you. And to a certain extent, you have to judge your success or failure based on what you're capable of. And where you were a couple of years ago. And I'm sure people are going to maybe say I'm making excuses for people, but I guess just maybe kind of stick with me for this. This is kind of a complicated subject. So when I look back on my life, so I think I've talked about it a bit in the past. When I was a child, like under the age of 10, in retrospect, I probably had childhood bipolar, which is very uncommon, but as far back as I could remember, I've been severely depressed, and I've had suicidal ideation. I don't think suicidal ideation is very common in children who are like 6 or 7 years old, but I've had really strong suicidal ideation for my entire life, back when I was very young, and I was a very unhappy child a lot of the time. I had severe social anxiety. I kind of hated everybody. I thought everybody else was evil, but I hated myself more than anything else. I was a very unhappy child. That's not my parents' fault. Don't ever think that. I have the best parents anyone can have. They've been nothing but supportive my own life, and they did their best to give me a great childhood, and they gave me a lot of really great things. We drove out west and we went to like Banff and Jasper. We drove out east. We went to Disney World. My mother just spent a lot of time with me. She would read books to my sister and I. They were very like supportive, and they would help me with my homework and stuff. The fact that my childhood was largely unhappy was kind of a reflection on me and the problems I had. But my point being, when I got to the age of like 10, I didn't have very many friends. I was miserable a lot of the time, and I just kind of hated other people in general. And that was kind of like the first 10 years of my life. And then when you kind of go from 10 to 20, that was another really rough patch. During high school, once again, my kind of bipolar issues kept getting worse until I think grade 11, where I started taking medication and going to therapy. But I got to a point where I started hurting myself. I never cut myself, but I would beat myself basically till I was like black and blue. I just punch myself and I'd stab myself with like pencils in my leg and stuff like that. And I went through that. I went through a period where I became an atheist. It was a very miserable part of my life. And I truly believed when I was about 15 or 16 that I wouldn't live to see 20. That eventually the darkness was going to overcome me and I was going to wind up either killing myself or killing somebody else. And really, the only thing that prevented me from doing that was because I loved my parents so much and I couldn't do that to them. Um, as worthless as I felt my life was, and that I felt I was an act of harm, I knew how much it would hurt my parents, and I guess at that time my grandparents, if I were to do something like that. They'd be devastated forever. So I felt I had to continue going on and try to accomplish things for them, if nothing else, because of all the time and love that they'd put into me. And then I went to university, and I was very, I guess you could say, self righteous. I had a very high opinion of myself. I did okay in university. It's funny because in graduate school, I'm getting like straight A's. I'm getting really good grades. But in undergraduate, at least for the first couple of years, I was getting like B's. And then in the last 2 years, I was getting like high B's to low A's. But I kind of just blame my professors for that. To be fair, a lot of the university education system is like a mess, but we can talk about that some other time. I developed very left wing political views, and I used that as kind of a way to explain why I had trouble dealing with other people, why the world didn't seem fair to me, as a way to kind of attack my parents. I kind of became very bitter towards my parents during this time period, as I saw them as like reactionary elements that were getting in the way of progress. I became like a really big fan of Barack Obama and stuff like that. And I had all these kind of like hipster left wing friends in university. And a lot of them were like really shady people in retrospect. One of them had a severe anger problem, and he's probably a serial killer, and I'm not even joking about that. I'm 100% serious. Another one had this pathology where he bullied people into cuddling with him. Um, just a lot of them they were all really, really anti-religious. Like to the point where one of them was talking about like some comic called Battle Pope, and it had like the Pope having sex with Mary or something, and he was trying to get me to read it and stuff like that. And that was the kind of general attitude they had towards, I guess, kind of anything traditional or anything kind of conservative. And I think that environment, just kind of stewing in a place where everybody's kind of expressing similar ideas to you. So it's I'm just trying to think how to describe it. So you're basically being told that all your problems are external, all your problems are because the world is like reactionary, or the world is illiberal, or we haven't had enough progress and that sort of thing. And then I was in an environment where everybody agreed with that and things still weren't going great. And I had a complete mental breakdown in the second year of university. And they switched my medication to something called Effexor, aka Side Effexor, which don't take if they ever try to get you to take it. I don't blame my doctor. He was kind of trying to like picking at straws at this point in time and trying to kind of come up with something. But I gained a lot of weight on that. If you take that while you're bipolar, and we didn't know I'm bipolar, it destabilizes you. It makes you go into frequent manic episodes. So I was just really angry all the time. I was also taking Seroquel, which is like an antipsychotic that makes you pass out into coma sleep. So I was kind of alternating between, because like I'd take Seroquel and I would collapse into coma sleep within like 15 minutes, and then I'd get like extremely tired, and I'd sometimes like almost fall asleep during class. And then on the other end, when I started taking side effects, or it would get to points where I just wouldn't sleep, like sometimes for a couple days in a row. It made me have this massive appetite, and I just like devoured everything in my path. So between that, I did poorly in a bunch of courses. I had some interpersonal problems. I just went through a complete mental breakdown in the second year, and I almost dropped out of university, and I started kind of getting back into like self harm and stuff. And I started going to some like additional therapy, and things were just really like rough. As I was kind of approaching the end of my second decade, I was once again, I didn't think I was going to reach the age of 20. And eventually I found that I guess kind of all this like left wing ideology I was experiencing wasn't really helping me. And I was kind of disgusted by a lot of aspects of it. Generally speaking, the indifference to evil, I think, was my biggest issue. How they would make excuses for things like female genital mutilation or just stuff like that. How messed up a lot of these people were, and how it justified their bad behavior and tried to say, like, oh, being obese is good, that kind of thing. So I started to kind of look at the alternative. And I think I very quickly found something in kind of more conservative thought that appealed to me. Basically, what it was, what it started to tell me is it's not just about you. Ironically enough, it's not just about you. It's not just about your pet projects. It's not just that everybody else is wrong and you're right. It's we live in a society. We live in a society with rules, with stuff like that, and we all need to contribute to it. And you have these traditions and stuff that have been built up over hundreds and hundreds of years, and you're part of this great chain of being, and you have a responsibility. Your responsibility isn't ultimately to yourself, it's to the past generations, to the future generations, and to God. And that we can find meaning both through the transcendental, but also by looking through history. And I was a political science major, so this was very appealing to me. And empirically looking at it and seeing what helps societies succeed and what helps societies fail. And the general attitude I found in conservatism, rather than a lot of forms of leftism, where it's very much a just kind of do whatever you want, conformity is bad, that sort of thing. Conservatism was like, we live in a society, you have to be a responsible and productive member of that society. So you have to get a job, you have to finish school, you have to start going to church, you have to pay your taxes, all that kind of stuff. You just have to be an adult. And that's what's important. And once you start living a proper lifestyle, you'll feel better. It's not the other way around. It's not that someday you'll just suddenly be successful because you feel good about yourself. It's you need to have some measure of discipline in your life and some form of structure in your life. And that'll help you to succeed. That'll help you to be a functional person. And so I started kind of reading that, and I started like that was very helpful to me because I've always been a person with very mercurial emotions, and you've probably noticed this if you've talked to me because of my bipolar. So there's always been a very big disconnect between, I guess you could say, my intellect and my feelings, and I always have trouble kind of making decisions based on my feelings because they're so weird, because they're so kind of all over the place. And I kind of what I found in conservatism is your feelings don't matter, your duties matter. Your responsibilities matter, and in fulfilling those, you will become a happier person. So there was that aspect to it. So I started listening to like conservative talk radio. I started reading conservative books, and I was starting to feel a lot better about myself. And I think one of the things I just kept seeing was people kept saying, "Oh, I go to church, you go to church," and I kind of dismissed Christianity But it's kind of funny when you think about it. I literally just kind of came to the conclusion one day, I want to be a responsible adult. Part of being a responsible adult is going to church. It's picking a religion and standing by it. That's just what you're supposed to do. So I started saying, well, I'm going to have to be a Christian because I'm a Westerner. I'm into all this conservative stuff. That's the logical place to start. So I started reading. I read C.S. Lewis, Dinesh D'Souza, some other books about Christianity. I'm sure people will like cringe when I say Dinesh D'Souza, but I actually liked What's So Great About Christianity, at least back in the day. Started reading stuff like that. I started spending a lot of time on Catholic Answers, and I kind of eventually just had I guess you could say almost a conversion experience. There was one night I just was crying really, really hard, and I think I cried for like hours, and then I just kind of accepted God into my heart. I mean, I'd always believed in God, to some degree, but just God as in like the Trinitarian God, God as in Jesus Christ. Part of it is just poor catechism, and I've talked about this in the past, where I didn't understand that Jesus is God's incarnation. I thought he was just some random dude, but that's neither here nor there. And so from there, I started to kind of looking for a denomination and stuff like that. And so as I kind of finished the second decade of my life, I was in a very precarious position. Um, around that time, I think I had a year or two left on my university degree. A lot of my interpersonal relationships had started to break up. I had abandoned pretty much all of my past political ideology, and I was kind of just starting from scratch. Around this time period, my oldest friend, who I'd known since like grade school, decided to abandon me, saying that he couldn't be friends with someone who had, at that time, pretty normal mainstream conservative political views. Kind of around this time, the rest of my friends, because I started like defending Christianity or like asking them to not like make sex jokes about Jesus, uh, they would they kind of abandoned me over time, and I kind of had falling out with them. And part of it is just I realized like some of these people I really shouldn't be spending time around. Like they were bad influences on me. Um, they were leading me down a bad path. Not necessarily like they were criminals or drug addicts or anything, but just down like into a mentally and spiritually bad place. And so I was finishing my degree. I had no idea what I was gonna do with my life. The Great Recession had happened, and I think for those of you who are younger or older, it's kind of hard to understand that. But I graduated from university just a year or two after the Great Recession, which basically wiped out a lot of the entry level jobs. So that generation that graduated, probably the best example would be people who graduated during the time of COVID. But I really had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I didn't really know how I'd get a job, etc. So I guess that kind of brings me to what the last decade's been like. As I said, I entered it severely depressed. I hadn't gotten proper medication. I was on Effexor, which made me angry, emotional, and gained a whole bunch of weight. I had no career prospects. I did some postgraduate education, not a master's, but kind of a diploma. I did a lengthy co op term. And the co op term actually paid a lot of money. And just because of the way I live, I was able to bank most of it. So I kind of did what I guess a lot of people do, and I went to Europe. And I guess I'd say, like, that was one of the first. That and finishing the, like, graduate program and doing the internship, I guess you could say were like the first major accomplishments. But going to Europe is something I'd always dreamed of doing, seeing Versailles, Notre Dame, seeing the city of Rome, Vienna, Neuschwanstein, Venice. These things had always been like a dream to me. It's something I wanted to do before I died, and I got to go see those all firsthand. And that was followed by like a really lengthy, dark period where I was unemployed for a long period of time. I kept doing more and more education, and it just wasn't really going anywhere. But around that time, I think right before I went on my trip, I had it. It was a bit of a struggle because my mother's family was very anti-Catholic. But I'd started to get involved in Catholicism. I went through RCIA. I got confirmed into the church and started receiving communion. So I had done that, and that had brought a certain stability to my life. Even if I do get bored during mass, and I often stop paying attention. Having that thing where uh, at X time every week you go and you focus on God, and it gives you some sort of purpose and structure, even if it's just the 1 hour a week. So that was very important to me, and I think honestly like that um, alone made the last 10 years worthwhile. Is I kind of finally found, I guess you could say, salvation and purpose in my life, and whether that's, I guess, more than most people can say. So that happened. I was, like I said, I was going through a really bad mental period. I got sent to a hospital, and a bad doctor diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder. And they told me that I'd never be allowed to change my medication again. So I had to spend like $2,000 of my own money to go to an independent psychologist and get a full assessment done, which determined I had bipolar. And then I took that back to my doctor, and he changed my medication to give me lamotrigine, which is a mood stabilizer. And my mood dramatically improved, and I've been much better since then. I started going to better quality therapy. In particular, I found group therapy very helpful. So I was going to group therapy. I was taking the proper medication, and I just was becoming like a much more stable person. And around that time, like things kind of kept improving. I had started my YouTube channel back when I think I was doing my internship. I made the first couple videos. And I mean, the first ones were awful. They were just literally recorded on my phone, my old like Galaxy S3. And I would just walk around. It wasn't even video, it was just an audio file, and I'd merge it with some sort of background image, and I'd put that up. And the quality was terrible. The takes were just really generic center right stuff, like normie conservative stuff. But I had the channel. I didn't really have anybody who commented on it back then, but that was something I was doing, and I eventually got my first, I guess you could say, real serious adult professional job that I stayed at for 3 years. And it was stressful. It was a lot of work, but it was also very rewarding. I picked up a lot of great experience there. Um, I think I achieved a lot at it. It didn't pay the best, but I was willing to commute quite a distance from where my parents lived, so I was able to bank basically most, like, I guess you could say 70 to 80% of my after tax salary for like 3 years, that I was able to invest that. So like, I guess you could say, like, so it's my mid to late 20s, and things have kind of turned around. I mean, I'm Catholic now. I'm going to church regularly. I got proper medication. I have proper therapy. I have a full time job. I'm learning skills. I'm banking money. There's a lot of stress in my life. There's a lot of bad things, but I'm actually finally getting somewhere. And like I said, I started the decade of my 20s being like nowhere, heading towards Nothingville, having no idea if I'm even going to like blow my brains out in the next couple of years. And then I had something. And then my YouTube channel got bigger and bigger as time went on, I think largely through my DSP videos. And so I was able to kind of do that too. So I had a job that was fulfilling, although the environment eventually got kind of abusive and toxic. Um, I was advancing in my career, even though they wouldn't give me a raise. I was saving money, I was building up my net worth, and I was having a YouTube channel that was growing. And I think the YouTube channel just even that gave me a purpose, because there are people have been told me Argent, I converted to Christianity, or I was a Christian, I became a Catholic, or something like that. So the knowledge that my channel has saved the soul of even like one person, let alone a number of people, I think makes the whole thing worthwhile. And I don't know if that's really something many people can say, is that they have been played a critical part in getting someone to, in saving someone, in getting someone to accept Jesus, to get baptized, to start to become like a Christian. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here. I'm just saying that was, I never thought I'd be able to do something like that. And a lot of people have told me over the years that I've helped them with mental health issues or things like that. And I mean, that's all amazing. I mean, I love you guys. It's even if this channel died tomorrow, and I would be really sad and depressed about it, I feel like I have accomplished a great deal. Not in terms of sub numbers or view numbers or money I've made, but in terms of, I think I have at least one person, I think many people, help them find their way to God and help them kind of make more sense of their life and pursue a healthier line of inquiry and a healthier way of looking at the world. And I think that alone made this whole thing worthwhile. And so I left my previous job and I moved to the one I had in this up until the summer. And I got fired for, well, I got laid off, not fired, because of COVID, and the company's probably bankrupt by now or about to go bankrupt, like so many are. And so here I am. I'm unemployed at the moment. I'm working on my master's degree. And I'm thinking I might move back in with my parents just to save money, because unemployment insurance isn't a ton, and just focus on getting my master's done. And I've been kind of depressed lately. I mean, it's hard to be unemployed. It's hard to be kind of pounding the pavement, trying to get a job. In this economy, it's really hard. Like, when I was doing this last year and I was leaving my old job, I got a lot more callbacks. Yeah, there were more callbacks. There was more postings. I got more offers, that sort of thing. And I can at least kind of tell myself now I have like 4 or 5 years of experience, like good experience in my field. It's just that the economy's a disaster at the moment. And I don't know how long I'm going to be in this. So maybe I have to move back in with my parents. It's not like it makes, I know I'm kind of made to feel like a loser, but that's just kind of the situation. That's kind of the way the cookie crumbles. I should just be grateful that I have parents who are willing to help me out in this kind of situation. I mean, I probably would have stayed at that other job at least until I got my master's done part time. Maybe longer, maybe advanced through the company or gotten a raise or something like that. But yeah, the whole thing is just kind of a mess. So here I am. I'm turning 30 soon, and I'm looking back on the last couple decades. And am I in a better place now than I was 10 years ago? Yeah, I'm still suffer from depression. I still have suicidal thoughts, but I'm in a much better place mentally. I'm in a better place mentally. What I consider a fairly successful YouTube channel, which I think is the best part of doing YouTube is all the cool people I've met. I've met people like Serp, like Terrellian, like Squiddo, um, like the mods on my Discord server, a bunch of other people, many of whom have become real life friends of mine. Some of them I've met in real life, some of them I just am real life friends with, but we haven't met physically yet. But I kind of went from having no friends, well, one friend, to having a bunch of friends. And just being able to have people I can go on and talk to every day and talk to about things we have in common. Going from just having none of that is a huge improvement to my life. It makes me feel much less lonely and is just kind of a much better state to be in. I have like 5 or 6 years. I have like 5 years experience now. I have extra education. I'm at least some of the way along in doing my master's. So I don't have a job. I haven't found, like, I guess you could say, stable or permanent employment. But then again, these days, unless you're working for the government, how many people actually are able to stay at their jobs? And that's not even because people wouldn't like to stay at their job. It's just kind of the way the economy is. And it sucks and it's abusive and it's horrible. But people get stuck doing like the gig economy and stuff like that. And it's a really difficult time for people who weren't kind of entering this era with a stable job before things started just switching over to an endless stream of contracts and that sort of thing. So maybe I haven't found like some permanent place where I can live for the rest of my life. Maybe I haven't found a job I can stay at for the rest of my life. But I have a lot of money saved up. I have experience now. I have my mental illness at least much better under much better control. I have friends now. I still have parents who love me and support me. In general, I think in most metrics, I'm in a much better place than I was 10 years ago. Much better place in basically everything. And I think if only just for me, given where I was, given that I had such bad, I still have horrible social anxiety, but it was so bad that I wouldn't even call places. Like I wouldn't even call stores to check the hours. I wouldn't call like helplines or info service or any of that stuff. I could barely send emails. I was just so shy and anxious. And I'm still extremely shy and anxious, but it's gotten a lot better. I'm in a much better spot now than I was back then. I guess the only thing I kind of haven't really gotten any further with is I still have never had a girlfriend. I've never kissed a girl, never been on a date, never any of that. It's just I've never really met anyone I've been interested in that way. And I think I always just kind of thought to myself, once I get like settled in a location, once I have a like a steady career, then I'll sit down and start to try to find a GF. And my mother said to me the other day, look, son, I understand your concern and it's a noble one, but you should probably just try to find a girlfriend anyways. Because the reality is you're never going to have a stable place in your life. That's just not the way things work anymore. And so you just have to accept that even if you get one, you might have to live a ways away from her. You're probably both going to have to move and stuff like that. And that's just unfortunately kind of the new normal, and you have to accept it and try to make it work. So I guess that's maybe kind of one of the goals for the next decade. So I guess the goal from the next decade is have a GF, um, finish my master's, try to kind of get my career back on track, and that sort of thing. But just looking back on where I was those 10 years ago, I think like nobody likes to get older. Everyone gets reflective and kind of sad on their birthday. But I think despite all of that, this year I'm going to try. I probably won't succeed. I'll probably cry on my birthday or get upset or something. But I'll try to be positive and I'll try to think of all the great things that I've achieved over the last decade. And how, at least by my standards, I've been successful and it's been a successful 10 years. And I'm much better off then than I was now. And maybe this is just something to do when I turn 40, is just to sit down and go, did I achieve everything that the average person my age has? Maybe not. Have I achieved everything I should have? Maybe not. Have I achieved stuff that is impressive for me, that is aligned with, that have I overcome my own weaknesses? And I think if I can say yes, then that was another successful decade. And I mean, some people look at this as you're 30 years old, you're kind of halfway through your life in which you're kind of really functional. After 60, your like cognitive faculties start going down, that sort of thing. You're going to start losing some of your body's spryness or whatever. But I mean, we all get old. Ultimately, I think we do all die alone. I mean, all men must die, as George R. R. Martin said. All men must die, and the only one who's there for us in the end is God. And I think I have been able to, even if I'm not the most pious or devout person, I am a man of great faith. Or at least I think I'm a man of a lot of faith. And that does help to deal with it. That does help to accept that inevitably I'm going to age. I'm going to lose the faculties of my youth. My mind's going to start to decay, and eventually, either through old age or through an accident or through illness, I'm going to die. And this world will pass away. And that while it's important to be part of this world, to try to succeed in this world, to fight evil in this world, ultimately salvation comes from God alone. It doesn't come from having a lot of money. It doesn't come from having a lot of fame or being recognized with Employee of the Month. It comes from your closeness to God and from His free grace. And ultimately, as I've said to many people, if I didn't believe that at the end of time, or when the world ends, that God would settle all debts, white and black, and set all things right, then I wouldn't be able to get through the day. But that belief and that faith is really what keeps me going. And like I said, as I move into the next decade of my life, that's just something I'm going to have to keep with. And it's something I'm going to have to keep pounding in and just, I guess you could just say, keep moving forward. So, thank you for listening to this. If you've listened through this really long, rambling summary of my life up till now, God bless you. I love each and every one of you guys. Thank you for following me for these years, and hopefully you follow me for another decade.